He was a boy genius. By 16, he was already at Harvard, absorbing the minds of academia like a sponge, brilliant, precise, almost unervingly so. But something inside him was quietly splintering. Fast forward 2 decades. The nation trembled under a different name, the Unabomber. From the solitude of a one-room cabin in the woods of Montana, an unassuming man began sending handcrafted bombs across America. His targets? Universities, airlines, tech executives. Anyone he believed, who was helping to usher in a future he feared, a world controlled by machines, surveillance, industrial chains, dehumanization. Over 17 years, he killed 3, maimed 23 more, left entire institutions in fear. And every time his bomb struck, investigators found the same thing. No fingerprints, no forensic trail, no pattern they could predict. He was brilliant. He was invisible. He was winning. So who was he? And how was he finally stopped? Not by a SWAT team, not by cutting-edge forensics, but by someone who loved him. A brother who recognized his voice in a 35,000-word anti-technology manifesto. This is not just the story of Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber. This is a story about genius and madness colliding. About how a man who could have changed the world chose instead to wage war against it. And how the most massive manhunt in FBI history came down to one impossible decision made around a dinner table. You're watching The Unabomber, a true crime story like no other. Long before the FBI ever coined the term Unabomber, there was just Ted. Born in Chicago in 1942, Theodore John Kaczynski entered the world in the shadow of a rapidly industrializing America, an America falling in love with machines, television, jets, rockets, the first sparks of Silicon Valley. But Ted's mind wasn't wired for the noise. It was built for silence and patterns. From the very beginning, it was obvious. Ted wasn't like the other kids. By age 6, he could solve complex puzzles. By 9, he was already being pushed into advanced math. And by 16, he was walking the hallowed halls of Harvard. Imagine that. 16 years old. Most kids that age are worried about acne and algebra. Ted was sitting in seminars with men twice his age, grappling with abstract logic, theoretical frameworks, the very architecture of mathematics. But brilliance, as history often teaches us, does not shield you from pain. At Harvard, something broke. He enrolled in a psychological study, led by a man named Henry A. Murray. The experiment was billed as a harmless test on personality and problem solving. But it was anything but harmless. Week after week, Ted, shy, reserved, barely an adult, was subjected to hours of brutal mental battering. He was tricked, humiliated, told his beliefs were idiotic. It was designed to fracture confidence, to simulate the breakdown of ideology. Some say it was meant to prepare minds for interrogation. Others believe it was simply cruel curiosity. Whatever the reason, Ted never truly recovered. The seed had been planted, the distrust of authority, the resentment toward manipulation, the simmering hate for a society that played games with the human soul. After graduating with a mathematics degree, he went on to earn a PhD from the University of Michigan. His dissertation was described by his professors as so complex, so elegant, that only a handful of people in the country could even understand it. He could have become anything: a tenured professor, a pioneer of computational theory, a respected name in science textbooks. But in 1969, after just 2 years of teaching at UC Berkeley, Ted walked away. No explanation, no farewell. He vanished from academia and slowly from society itself. He moved to Lincoln, Montana, built himself a 10 by 12 foot cabin. No electricity, no running water, no phone, just a stove, a bed, a typewriter, and his rage. From that quiet corner of wilderness, he watched the world evolve. Computers were getting smaller. Corporations were getting bigger. The machines he feared were winning. And so he made a decision. If he couldn't stop the future with words, he would try something else. He began building bombs. Not out of madness, but method. Not with chaos, but with precision. And every letter he wrote, every wire he stripped, every package he sealed with tape and a name, it was all a message. It began with a box. May 1978, Northwestern University. A security guard notices a suspicious package left in a parking lot. It's addressed oddly to a professor at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, but it's been returned. No one recognizes it. So the guard does what anyone might do. He picks it up. It explodes in his hands. It isn't lethal. Not this time. But it's only the beginning. The FBI didn't know it then. No one did. But a shadow campaign had just begun. One that would span 17 years, crisscross the country, and turn mailboxes into weapons. The following year, in 1979, another bomb. This time on an American Airlines flight. Flight 444, departing from Chicago, Midair. The device is placed in the cargo hold. It doesn't detonate properly, but the smoke it releases is enough to trigger a chaotic emergency landing. 12 passengers treated for smoke inhalation. No fatalities. But the message is becoming clearer. No place is safe. Not even the skies. This changes everything. Up until now, these had been isolated oddities, strange, seemingly personal bombs, always crudely built, always anonymous. But the attack on a commercial airliner made one thing certain. This wasn't just the work of a disturbed loner. This was a federal threat. The FBI creates a task force, codename Unabomber, university and airline bomber. A blend of his first two known targets. But behind that sterile acronym, investigators are baffled. Who is he? What does he want? By 1980, 3 agencies are officially involved: the FBI, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, and the United States Postal Inspection Service. Still, progress is painfully slow. The bombs themselves are unique, not mass-produced or traceable. They're handmade, every piece, every wire, every metal shard. No fingerprints. No DNA. Not even a consistent signature to go by. Just wood, nails, batteries, and rage. Investigators begin to call him the junkyard bomber. His devices are built with parts scavenged from everyday items: scrap metal, batteries from radios, nails, screws. It's not sophistication that throws off the investigators. It's the improvisation. His bombs are brilliant in their simplicity and horrifying in their design. Then he gets personal. June 1980. A man named Percy Wood receives a package at his home. Wood is the president of United Airlines. The package includes a copy of a novel, Ice Brothers, by Sloan Wilson, along with a letter inviting him to read it. But hidden inside is a bomb. When it explodes, Wood survives, but he suffers shrapnel wounds and burns. Still, there is no claim of responsibility, no manifesto, just the cold certainty that someone out there had judged him and sentenced him. What made it all worse for investigators was that there were no demands, no ransom, no name. The bomber wasn't seeking money or fame. He wanted something else. A war had begun. One man, alone in the woods, taking on what he saw as the entire system. And he wasn't finished. Not even close. By the mid-1980s, the pattern was clear, but the target list was not. He struck professors, scientists, CEOs, airliners, computer stores, public figures. No one could draw a straight line through the dots, and that made him more dangerous than anyone expected. Each bomb arrived without warning. Sometimes it was disguised as a gift. Other times, it came wrapped in academic packaging, addressed like research material. But always, it was a time bomb, crafted with obsessive precision, designed to maim, to terrify, and sometimes to kill. And in December 1985, he did just that. Hugh Scruton, 38 years old, was the owner of a computer rental store in Sacramento. A self-made man, father, entrepreneur. On a quiet afternoon, he walked outside and found a small piece of wood near the back parking lot. He bent down to pick it up. The bomb hidden inside blew his chest open. Scruton was the Unabomber's first fatality. And now, the line between ideological protest and murder had vanished. The gloves were off. Over the next 10 years, the attacks grew bolder, more calculated, more personal. February 1987, Salt Lake City. Gary Wright, another computer store owner, sees a piece of lumber in the parking lot near his shop. When he touches it, a bomb explodes. Shrapnel tears into his body. He survives, but with over 200 pieces of metal embedded in his skin. What's remarkable is that this moment, this very bombing, is the first time anyone sees him. A sketch is drawn from a witness who glimpsed a man with sunglasses and a hooded sweatshirt, calmly leaving the scene. It's the now infamous sketch. Angular jaw, shadowed eyes behind shades, the hood pulled up. The face that would haunt America. Despite the sketch, the case stays cold. But inside the FBI, pressure is mounting. A new generation of profilers begin to emerge, tapping into psychological forensics and behavioral analysis. Their theory: the bomber is a white male, likely in his 30s or 40s, highly educated, possibly with experience in academia or engineering. A loner, someone disillusioned with modern society, probably living in isolation, somewhere in the western United States. It was a narrow profile, but still not narrow enough. Tens of thousands of tips flooded the hotline. None of them stuck. The bomber was, in every meaningful way, a ghost. And outside the walls of the bureau, panic was spreading. The 1990s arrived. Technology was booming. Cell phones, email, the internet, it was a new era. But with every innovation, the Unabomber grew more furious. March 1985. A graduate student at UC Berkeley opens a suspicious package in a campus computer lab. The explosion leaves him injured but alive. The university world begins to murmur, who's next? November 1985. A professor at the University of Michigan suffers permanent hearing damage from another device. Again, no warning, no pattern. Then the fear moved from campuses to homes. In 1993, 2 bombs detonated in close succession. The first injures a geneticist, Dr. Charles Epstein, at his home. 2 days later, Yale computer science professor David Galerner opens a package and is severely wounded. He survives, but loses vision in one eye and part of his right hand. The message? No one is safe, not even in their living rooms. And just like that, America began to look at its mailboxes differently. Parents warned their kids not to pick up packages. Postal workers were trained to spot suspicious materials. Universities hired security consultants. Airlines prepared for new threats. And every few months, the Unabomber struck again, just enough to keep the country guessing and the FBI on the defensive. He was watching the world change and fighting it with fire and steel. But change was coming for him too. It was just a matter of who would blink first. In 1995, after nearly 2 decades of violence and silence, the Unabomber finally spoke. It wasn't a bomb this time. It was a demand. That year, the New York Times and the Washington Post each received letters from someone claiming to be the man behind the terror. No riddles, no metaphors, just one condition: publish his 35,000-word essay, his manifesto, or he would kill again. The message was cold and clear. He wrote, "If this manuscript is published in a major newspaper, I will desist from terrorism." America now faced an impossible question. Do we negotiate with a terrorist? Attorney General Janet Reno and FBI Director Louis Freeh convened with newspaper executives. The FBI was divided. Some saw it as surrender. Others saw it as a chance to finally glimpse inside the mind of a phantom. Ultimately, they agreed. On September 19, 1995, the Washington Post printed the entire document under the headline, Industrial Society and Its Future. It was not a typical manifesto. It was not unhinged or ranting. It was chillingly coherent. The essay argued that the Industrial Revolution had been a disaster for the human race, that technology had robbed mankind of its freedom, its dignity, its soul. It warned that computers, genetic engineering, and mass communication were tools of control, that they reduced people to cogs in a machine they could no longer understand, let alone resist. He wrote, "The system does not and cannot exist to satisfy human needs. Instead, it is human behavior that has to be modified to fit the needs of the system. And here was the heart of it. He believed the only path to salvation was to destroy that system entirely. The public was horrified, but they were also curious. Was this the ranting of a madman or the warning of a prophet? Could someone this intelligent also be this dangerous? Some readers dismissed it as extremist nonsense. Others, quietly, admitted that parts of it struck a nerve. But while the world debated, one man sat at his kitchen table and felt his heart stop. David Kaczynski. He hadn't spoken to his brother Ted in years. Their relationship had always been strained. Ted, the loner genius. David, the more social younger brother. But as he read the words in the paper, David felt a terrifying familiarity. The tone, the phrasing, even certain idioms. It was like hearing a voice from the past whisper through the page. He turned to his wife, Linda, and said, "I think my brother wrote this." The guilt was immediate. The dread followed. What do you do when you think the man who shared your childhood is a serial killer? David wrestled with it for weeks. He reviewed old letters, looked for confirmation. Eventually, he hired a private investigator. Then he reached out anonymously to the FBI. The agents took the tip seriously. A linguistic analysis compared Ted's past writings to the manifesto. The match wasn't exact, but it was close enough. Enough to get a warrant. Enough to send agents to Lincoln, Montana. The brother who once looked up to Ted was now the one who turned him in. And it broke him. David later said, "I was haunted by the idea of not doing anything and someone else dying, but also haunted by the idea of destroying my brother's life." It wasn't justice he wanted. It was peace. It was an end. And just like that, the greatest domestic manhunt in modern American history had a name. Ted Kaczynski. April 3rd, 1996. Lincoln, Montana. The forest was still, silent, as if it sensed something was about to break. FBI agents approached the tiny, weather-worn cabin. They moved slowly, rifles raised, every step cautious. They didn't know if the man inside had traps, explosives, a gun. All they knew was that he'd spent 17 years building bombs, masterpieces of destruction, and had shown no remorse. Inside the cabin, a small stove, a narrow bed, stacks of handwritten pages, typewriters, wire, nails, metal scraps. And in the middle of it all, sitting calm, ragged, and quiet, was Ted Kaczynski. The arrest was swift. No resistance. No words. Just a nod. It was over. Inside that cabin, agents discovered the proof they needed. Detailed bomb-making notes. Journals recounting every attack. Fully assembled devices, ready to be mailed. A live bomb already addressed, sitting on a shelf. A homemade kill list. They had him. But now came the question. What do you do with a man who doesn't want to be understood, only heard? The trial began, and immediately it unraveled. Kaczynski refused to cooperate with his legal team. He didn't want an insanity defense. To him, that would be a lie. He wasn't insane, he was right. The world was broken. Technology was enslaving humanity. His acts, he insisted, were a form of resistance, of revolution. His attorneys disagreed. They believed he was schizophrenic. They wanted to spare him the death penalty, but Ted wouldn't allow it. He filed motion after motion to dismiss them, even requested to represent himself. The court said no. He tried to make a deal. If they'd let him speak freely in court about his ideology, he'd plead guilty. But his request was denied. The courtroom was not to become a pulpit for anti-modern sermons. So eventually, in January 1998, he pled guilty to all charges. There was no trial, no jury, no dramatic cross-examinations, just a sentence for life terms without parole, plus 30 years. He was sent to ADX Florence, the federal supermax prison in Colorado, a facility often referred to as the Alcatraz of the Rockies. There, in solitary confinement, he lived in a concrete cell the size of a parking space. No internet, no human contact, just books, paper, silence. Years later, he was moved to a medical facility in Butner, North Carolina. for declining health. No parole, no release, no redemption. He had wanted to destroy the system. Instead, the system sealed him away. The bomb stopped. The headlines faded. The name Unabomber became something else, an entry in history books, a case study in psychology classes, the subject of documentaries and true crime podcasts. But for David Kaczynski, the story never really ended. After the arrest, he quietly accepted the FBI's reward, $1 million for the tip that led to his brother's capture. But he didn't keep it. He couldn't. The guilt was too heavy. Instead, David donated the majority of the money to the victims and their families. He helped establish a fund for survivors quietly, without publicity, without fanfare. It was the only way he knew how to balance the unbearable weight of betrayal and love. He had stopped a killer, but he had also turned in his brother. The pain of that choice never truly faded. In the years that followed, the public's interest in Ted Kaczynski never disappeared. It evolved. In 2017, the scripted drama series Manhunt, Unabomber aired to critical acclaim, diving deep into the investigation and the psychological cat-and-mouse game between Ted and the FBI. It was gripping and disturbingly intimate. Then, in 2020, Netflix released Unabomber. In his own words, a documentary that let viewers hear from Ted himself, using archival audio from prison and interviews with people who had known him. The picture became more complex. He wasn't just a murderer, or a recluse, or a scholar. He was all of it and none of it. A man torn between unmatched intellect and profound alienation. A man who hated what the world had become and chose violence over voice. Debates soon erupted. Was Ted Kaczynski a terrorist, a madman, or a tragic symbol of unchecked genius collapsing in on itself? Some academics dissected his manifesto, pointing out uncomfortable truths about surveillance, automation, and the erosion of privacy. Others warned against romanticizing a man who maimed and murdered. He had called himself a prophet, but history does not judge prophets by their words alone. It remembers their acts. And Ted's acts left scars. On June 10, 2023, at the age of 81, Ted Kaczynski was found dead in his prison cell in Butner, North Carolina. It was suicide. Even in death, he left no note, no final word, just silence. The same silence he once fled to in the Montana woods, now swallowed him forever. And with him, perhaps, died one of the most baffling chapters in American criminal history. He wanted to destroy the machine, but instead, he became another cog in the story of how far a man will go when he believes he's the only one who sees the truth. In the end, the story of a Unabomber isn't just about bombs. It's about a brilliant mind left unchecked, about how genius without grounding, passion without connection, and belief without compassion can burn everything in its path. Ted Kaczynski was a man at war with the world, with machines, with modernity, but perhaps most of all, with himself. He saw the future, and he feared it. But instead of fighting it with reason, he chose violence. Instead of conversation, he delivered destruction. And while the ideology in his manifesto sparked debate, the blood on his hands silenced any sympathy. Still, his story leaves us with questions. Questions we're still wrestling with decades later. Was technology really to blame? Or was it just the scapegoat for something deeper? Could this tragedy have been avoided if anyone, had truly seen the warning signs earlier? Could the trauma he suffered as a young man have been treated before it festered into rage? And perhaps most heartbreakingly, was David's decision to turn in his brother an act of betrayal? Or one of the bravest, most painful acts of love a human being can make? We may never have all the answers, but what we can do is learn, reflect, question, discuss. So now it's your turn. What do you think? Is Kaczynski a cautionary tale of mental illness neglected, a case of philosophy taken too far, or something else entirely? Let us know in the comments. And if this story moved you, challenged you, or made you think, please consider subscribing, liking this video, and sharing it with someone who needs to hear it.